A BBC reporter had come under the same pressure from those present. So this is Mr. Watt. The Daily Mail carefully constructed its article in order to just give the one-sided argument that the very nasty, violent protesters were there harassing and threatening and intimidating a senior BBC reporter. So this was the headline, and it's quite a long one. Police probe officers in action when BBC reporter was chased and branded a traitor, scum and a liar while covering anti-lockdown demo. One of the key pictures they selected was of this particular gentleman, clothing which probably gives him an image of being a bit of a biker, and therefore the Daily Mail is able to get the idea across that these are rough, tough, aggressive people. But if you follow the video clip, there's no actual physical violence at all, but the Daily Mail really going for the story.
BBC! GB News? Resistance TV? Is that GB News? No. Oh, right, GB News. How do you guys justify lying by a factor of around 1,000 about the number of protesters? Causing more lies, using funds that you all need to for. Please justify how you make a living. Why don't you set up your own news company like we have and earn money for people who want to the internet?
New strain of a mutation of an old version of a new case. Today, the sport. Most thing to say about the sport is that several players have contracted the coronavirus.
You completely ignore the Constitution. How do you sleep at night? With the fact that you're funded by the taxpayer, how do you justify that to yourself? Why have you lied and said that lockdown's illegal? How can it be legal to lock people in their houses without judge, jury and execution?
There we have it, Nick Watt, BBC reporter, running back to the safety of Downing Street. In general, the crowd extremely well behaved, but certainly they wanted to challenge him, and in the beginning, very reasonable questions are being put to him. In the latter stages, one or two people getting a bit enthusiastic and in his face. But Alex, there was no real violence there. He wasn't punched, he wasn't hit, he wasn't bat at, something which a crowd out of control might have done.
Several previous generations would know perfectly well that hardened senior people like Nicholas Watt, the political editor of BBC's Newsnight, no less, the agenda-setting show to end all shows, would be perfectly inured to dealing with the public in an enthusiastic, and yes, I will say, in a traditionally British manner, which involves more than it does on the continent, raising your voice, possibly having had a drink or two on both sides, the journalists and the crowd, although in this case I think they're all sober. Okay, the chap in the blue tracksuit top touches Mr. Watt. I think even in the old days that was out. A large chunk of this is the frayed sensibilities and unrealistic expectations of today's commentariat, both the journalistic side and the political side of the House. They are, after all, the same blob and feed freely from one to the other.
I'm afraid I'm going to call her not so pretty on this one. The anti-lockdown protesters are a mob and their actions are appalling. The video of Nick Watt being abused by a mob is appalling and distressing. Really, we haven't got Boris because he didn't speak. He got a spokesperson to speak for him. This footage is deeply disturbing. Journalists should never face that kind of behavior. The right to protest may be fundamental in our democracy, but violence, threats and intimidation is never acceptable. So,
but there was no violence, there were no threats, and intimidation. Well, that's more down to him than anybody else.
I couldn't agree, Mike. So we just add, this is comment from UK column. The right to protest is fundamental in a democracy, but not when people think they can protest my lockdown and my BBC fear propaganda. So don't think you're going to challenge Boris Johnson. That's why he's so worried about what's taken place. The safety of journalists is fundamental to any democracy. They must be able to report unhindered, free from abuse. There's absolutely no justification for any journalist to be treated in this way. We're going to say the reality is, Mr. Davey, that you helped create this situation by using your 5 billion propaganda machine to ramp up fear, stress and anxiety, because it was the BBC that was promoting all of that applied psychology used in the SAGE group, which knew it was going to have people inflamed, stressed, anxious and ultimately angry. So Tim Davey helped promote that. He ignored hundreds of thousands of people peacefully protesting on the street. So I think we've got to bring Tim Davey's name onto screen, and we've got to say it's his personal actions which are now rebounding on his own BBC journalists. So who's to blame? Well, Tim Davey, partly to blame by his actions in how he has failed to report, or he's misreported what's been happening with. They couldn't resist having a go at Piers Corbyn. So we've got Piers here with a big banner saying, "We demand public TV debate with all sides of science on dangers, especially for children." That seems a very reasonable request, but not for the Daily Mail, of course, because their caption for this photo was ahead of the announcement, thousands of anti-lockdown protesters, including arch conspiracy theorist Piers Corbyn, the brother of former Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn, took to the streets in anger at the decision. So this is more spinning of what took place. There should be a fully publicised, proper debate on the safety of, but of course the BBC isn't going to do that and the government isn't. Now, we'd just like to give a special mention to Resistance GB, the team that took the footage. From what we could see and confer, police weren't worried about Nick Watt, given that anti-lockdown events are, in our significant experience of covering them, almost entirely peaceful, and as it transpired, he was entirely unharmed. What concerns us more is the utter lies and hypocrisy from government, who have systematically, violently attacked independent journalists, ourselves having been threatened and assaulted by police on Monday, and nearly all of our colleagues having been threatened or violently and unlawfully assaulted many previous times. Yet what we face completely pales in comparison to the false imprisonment and torture of Julian Assange, the most famous journalist in the world, currently held in Belmarsh prison away from his wife and family for telling the truth. Boris Johnson has stated that journalism is the lifeblood of our democracy, yet he and Priti Patel, who also made a statement, are some of the foremost people in the country responsible for violent attacks on journalists and the suppression of free press. Anybody can find footage of Julian Assange being dragged out of the Ecuadorian embassy. What's happened since is far worse. Since Monday, the mainstream media has repeatedly requested permission to use our footage. We told them all to get stuffed. They've lied about numbers of protesters by a factor of 1,000. They've lied about protesters attacking police who've assaulted them. We've turned down thousands of pounds in commission out of principle. Instead, we've offered our footage for free to the UK column, Unity News Network and Russia Today for principal coverage. We've noted of what's truly going on in our country. Regardless, many mainstream media have chosen to steal our footage, regardless, and use it without permission. This only serves to underline the sheer arrogance of the mainstream, that they'll simply take what they want, regardless of whether it belongs to them, in order to feed their narrative. If the mainstream told the truth and did honest journalism, then we wouldn't exist, nor would the growing skepticism of nearly everything they say. We're coming for their jobs, and we'll just keep coming.
I'm sincerely impressed by Will and Laura running Resistance GB in that way. The irony of the situation is, of course, that Mr. Nicholas Watt only deigned to come over and give them the time of day, which he regretted after 3 seconds, because he thought they were fellow members of the bubble. He thought they were within the charmed circle and that he could draw an eye onto them. He thought they were GB News. So that's an irony of the situation. As soon as he realized it was what he would regard as plebs from the new media, he turned his back on them and said, "Oh, I'm only reporting. I'm not here for anything else." Deeply ironic. Also, the point you made just there, Brian, about the nicking of coverage. This has happened to us as well, and I dare say to Unity News Network and RT, the others who were given the honourable mention by Will and Laura. In our case, at least one instance I can bear in mind, I can recall. is that Chloe Hadjimatheou, of course, of the BBC, nicked some of our interview with Vanessa Beeley in order to put together a hit piece, a hatchet job against her.
So we just finish off Resistance GB because Will and Laura were kind enough to let UK Column have some of the email exchanges with some of the bigger media companies. Aaron Moy from BBC Westminster. Hi, I work for BBC Politics and we're interested in potentially using a still or a clip. And he was given this reply. Hi, the BBC is funded through fear, violence and intimidation. You consistently lie about the criminal and unconstitutional lockdowns illegally imposed by the government when hundreds of thousands of people marched on the streets for their freedoms a few weeks ago. You declined to cover it. If you wish to do journalism, then we suggest you do what we do. From Jenny Hauser from Eurovision. Hello, I'm contacting you from the European Broadcasting Union about the video of the BBC reporters being chased away at yesterday's protest. Could we get permission to use this video in news reports with a courtesy? And the reply was, if you want to do journalism, then we suggest you make a product that people aren't forced to pay for by government and that they choose by their own free will to buy or donate to, as we do. If you follow our work, maybe you'll learn how to do your jobs properly. You people fund yourselves off fear and intimidation. The people hate you, and rightly so. No, you do not have permission to use our video. This is from LBC. Good afternoon. I hope you're well. My name is Luke Dolan. I work for the Global Video Desk in London. Would it be okay for LBC to use this video in our website player apps and social channels with full credit to you? We and our colleagues have repeatedly been threatened and violently and unlawfully attacked by the Metropolitan Police over the past year, including yesterday, for doing our jobs as journalists. Your failure to mention this, focusing on the plight of privileged BBC liars framed through the narrative of criminal politicians in your article, is exactly why you do not have permission to use our footage. We know how it will be framed. Poor old James O'Brien, they put a PS in saying that he's a disgrace. We're going to say, if you appreciate what this team has been doing, getting out there and taking some really excellent video, perhaps you would be kind enough to support them on their channels and also via that PayPal link, because everything they're doing at the moment